my name is Gabrielle Foxworthy. Today I will be interviewing Donna Foxworthy, my mom, for my U.S. history final project on social history. And the point of this project is to learn more about people's average day lives. So, you used to be a teacher at Desert Christian. What grades did you teach?
I would say I'm still a teacher at Desert Christian. I think I would call myself furloughed right now. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th for 4 years.
Okay. What classes did you teach?
I was hired on primarily for a math teacher, so my first 3 years I was focused on math and computers, and it kind of turned into computer lab, morphed into Spanish lab for second semester, and I taught a bunch of different discipleship classes, taught a class of geography, even taught a PE section.
So what are discipleship classes?
Discipleship classes are, the goal of discipleship classes really to do life together and just to embody the gospel and live it out, to try to live out Jesus in front of people and just let people into your lives and see what Jesus looks like to you. So I did everything from, I had knitting, sewing, a recycle class, and most recently I did the farm class for a year at the middle school.
How long have you been teaching?
Well, I feel like we're all teachers and we're all learners all the time. And so I feel like everybody is constantly teaching everyone something. And we should always be learning something too. So I feel like I've always been a teacher, but technically I've only been in the classroom for 4 years. And then before that, I homeschooled 4 children for 14 years. So I homeschooled for 14. And even back then, before I had kids, I was in the College of Education, but I ended up with a child development degree.
How did you become interested in teaching?
That's a great question. I don't know. When I was young, I always, I guess my mom was a teacher in a sense. She was a stay-at-home mom, but she really struggled being born in a Hispanic household because her parents were both immigrants, and they only spoke Spanish. But when my grandmother, they moved from Bisbee, and the law was at the time when she had to go to school that if you spoke English, you'd be paddled in front of class. They came over on a mining visa. They actually worked in the Bisbee mines. And so she was a little girl in the Bisbee school. And so to learn English, it was called immersion. You had to speak only English, which is hard to do if you don't speak English. And so when she would speak Spanish to her classmates, they'd take you in the front of class and paddle you with a big wooden paddle. Well, my grandma was so humiliated and so traumatized that she vowed when she had children, she would never teach them Spanish. She would only teach them English. So my mom, your grandma, imagine this, growing up in a household with 2 Spanish speakers who would only speak English to her. So my mom felt between 2 worlds her whole life. She felt like she never was fully literate with Spanish. She never had a mastery of Spanish. And she also struggled with having a mastery of English because she came from 2 Spanish-speaking parents. So she was kind of I call it the gap generation, where you lose the language. And so my mom, your grandma, really struggled between Spanish and English. And because of that, she became a bibliophile, and that's a book lover. She became a lover of words. And so growing up, she would have, there'd be scraps of paper all over the house, no kidding, with like words and definitions and pronunciations in both Spanish and English everywhere. We had a phone book, and when she'd talk on the phone, she'd look words up in the dictionary. And so anyways, I think she was so ashamed of not being fully fluent in Spanish and not being fully fluent in English. She was so ashamed of that she really wanted her children, me and your Uncle Greg and your Aunt Shelley, she wanted us to be completely literate in English. And because of that, she just kind of became a freak for us as a mom of books. And so she was taking us to the library, like, I don't know, it seemed like we went at least 2-3 times a week. My mom took us to the library, bought us books, read us books. We had books everywhere, words, books. And because of this, and this is, you asked me why we got interested in teaching, I think because of this, my mom was kind of known in our neighborhood as, like when children were struggling at our school with reading, it was kind of like, oh, you should send your child to Camille, my mom. Send her to Camille because her kids are really good with reading. They're all really, really, smart, good readers. And so growing up, my mom would always be tutoring kids. Like we'd have all these weird random kids in my house, like all the time. You'd come home from school and you'd see older kids or younger kids, and my mom would be tutoring them, teaching them how to read. I never really thought too much about it. It was just part of my growing up. To this day, I don't even know if, I'm sure she got paid, but the neighborhood kids would just show up at our door because Camille knew how to teach reading. And so I think because of that, I just grew up in a very literature-rich household that valued teaching and valued language and passing that on. And so it was very natural to, pass that on, I guess.
So do you feel, so obviously that made a difference in why you teach. But did she ever help you with your school, your homework?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, and she was such a good teacher when I was young, but she didn't go much beyond, she only took a few college classes. She never went to college. Mm-hmm. And so she wasn't this, I would say she wasn't book learned. She didn't know about the world through books. She knew about the world through life experience in her hands. So my grandfather, your great-grandfather, her dad, and grandma, they could do anything. They could do anything. They could fix Grandpa could fix cars and build cabinets, and he could do absolutely anything with his hands. He didn't know much about books. He didn't have an education beyond, I think, 5th grade, my grandfather. But he could do anything and learned anything. And he could wire a house. He could plumb a house. He could fix any car. I grew up with my own tool set in his wood shop in his house, and he taught me woodworking and carpentry. He taught me everything about plumb lines and about gardening and how he would fertilize, and he would compost before composting was even a thing. And he had this incredible garden, and Grandma could cook and sew. She could sew anything. She could make dresses and suits, and all those things I learned from them. I learned how to make tamales, which a lot of Hispanics cannot make, but I make tamales. I learned how to sew dresses from Grandma. And so I grew up in a very rich culture of learning, even though it wasn't I wouldn't say classical education, like math and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And then culturally, obviously, they passed their culture on to me. And Grandma, they actually passed their faith on to me too. She's the one that would say her prayers with me every night that I would spend the night with her. She would say the Lord's Prayer, and that's where I learned the Lord's Prayer, was from my grandmother. So I grew up in a learning environment, always learning.
Yeah. So out of all people you could teach, why do you teach middle schoolers?
I think that's the Lord's sense of humor, because your dad and I did middle school ministry. Well, we've traditionally done middle school ministry throughout our lives. And every time we've dived into middle school ministry, we've always hated it. We've always said, oh my gosh, middle schoolers are impossible. And then we did wildlife, we did young life, middle school ministry when your older sisters and your brother were all kind of teenagers, middle school. And we just thought, oh my gosh, this is the most difficult time of life. Like, everyone hates junior high. Like, it's just such a hard time of life. And so I just think it's funny because I think the Lord has given me a soft spot for what a hard time that is in someone's life. And he just keeps putting us back in middle school. I don't know why.
So after teaching math and computers and Spanish and PE and discipleship and all of your classes and homeroom, you, and being a hands-on mom and wife, you got in a car accident last summer of 2019 in June. So what exactly happened that day of the accident?
So we were going to, we were supposed to leave on a trip the following day. And so I just had to get to the middle school to make a copy. They told me have a paper copy of your passport and your visa because if anything goes down or the computers go down or whatever, just have backup paper copies of your everything, boarding passes. So I was actually going to the middle school to make copies. And I was at the light at the high school where the fire department is, and the fire truck was pulling out. And it was starting to cut off traffic. So the light was turning red for me. It was flashing yellow. And so I stopped at the red light and sat there, and I saw in my rearview mirror a black car coming up kind of from Baggins. And I could see he was going very fast, and then I could see he wasn't slowing down, and then I could see he didn't see me, and then I could see when he finally got up close, like there wasn't anyone in the car seat, the driver's seat. He was kind of bent over, like fiddling with the radio, or I don't even know. And so he slammed into me at about 50 miles an hour, and my head struck the steering wheel. The glass broke in all the windows, and the car spun around, and he came out screaming, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And I was just bleeding profusely, and I really didn't really know exactly. I really had thought I was going to die at the moment of impact because I knew he was going to hit me, and I didn't know what to do. So anyways, and then shortly after I was hit, I thought, oh gosh, I almost wish I had died. My head hurt so much from striking the steering wheel. So that's what happened.
So just to add to the concussion on top of that, you split your head open, right? You got
I got 20 stitches, and we're still not exactly clear if it was 20 or more, because after I got the stitches removed about a week or 10 days after the accident, a couple more stitches kept working out of my scalp. So it was around 20. It may have been more, like it may have been 22, but I think the final count was 20. So they sutured my scalp, and they took me by ambulance, and I had a CT scan that said my brain was not bleeding. And they just kind of watched me and sent me home. I remember in the ambulance, though, they were asking me, like, do you know your name? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And then they're like, do you know the president? And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I'm like in my head thinking, Carter, Ford, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, like I'm Bush, Obama, like I'm trying to go through, and then I finally derived it was Obama, and then I was like, oh, what's his name? It's Trump. But I swear it felt like an eternity of trying to get to the answer. And I knew then, because the paramedics asking me all these names, but that's when I knew like something was really wrong with my brain, because not only was I searching for the answer, but I couldn't tell him. My mouth wasn't working. I couldn't. So it was really scary because I thought, I can't talk to him. Mm-hmm. And so all this is going on in my head and I'm not responding. And I know I'm not responding.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like he thinks I'm just sitting there like a turnip and I have all these thoughts. I'm literally going through like Nixon. Like I'm trying to go like what? Who's the next? I'm going through the entire order of presidents. It's ridiculous. And I'm trying to get to like no, that's not it. No, that's not it.
So what has it been like recovering from the accident, from the concussion?
So I think the first 12 to 16 weeks were just excruciating head pain. It was just the worst splitting headache ever. It's just like having a constant migraine. I think that was the primary thing. And then once I went to physical therapy, I still do, but I went about 3 days a week, sometimes more. But I had needles put in my scalp to try to get the muscles to relax. It was just whiplash and head pain. And then once that was getting better, then we started like physically working on my neck and my back where I got twisted over the steering wheel and trying to work out how that was affecting my gait. That's the way you walk. Mm-hmm. So it was just affecting my whole posture and everything because that twisted. And then finally, after that, I went to Dr. Martin and I got prisms for my eyes because my eyes are now, they don't pair together, they cross. And so I have like a double vision. So I got prisms. So that was about month, maybe 6. And then most recently, right around that time, I had an ear test from the ENT doctor. And this ear test basically showed that my ear, which controls all my balance, is broken. And so I've been basically like car sick or like motion sickness since the accident. So now what I'm working on, my physical therapy, is mostly like balance. Mm-hmm. So like right now I go to what's called vestibular therapy. And so it's your eyes and your ears and your brain all working together. And it's very difficult. So like one task will be like, I'm sitting on an exercise ball and there's all these like Post-it notes on the wall, like maybe 1 through 15 on the wall. And he'll say, okay, I just want you to bounce really quietly on the ball. And then I'll start to bounce and he'll say, now I want you to find 7 plus 2. And so then I have to turn my head and make my eyes find 7 plus 2, but then I have to say to him 9. So the whole time I'm looking for the number 9. And what happens is I can fall off the ball because I lose my balance, or I stop bouncing because I can't do the physical part and think at the same time, or I bounce and I can do the mental part and figure out the math, but then my mouth won't work to say the number 9. And so the whole point is to get your eyes and your ears and your body to work together again, because when you get concussed, you drop off parts of your, you know this, like your eyes will work, but then you can't hear things, or you read something, but you don't understand it. And so like different parts of your brain, you can only do so much. And so this therapy, I actually burst into tears. I didn't tell you this, but I burst into tears last week during therapy because it was like he was giving me this task for like a kindergartner to do, and I couldn't do it. Like it was like what's 2 plus 4? But I couldn't do it.
So you feel like before the concussion you could have done it easily.
Oh, yeah. Like he'll make you stand with one foot in front of the other, okay? And then you have to tick-tock your head to left and right. And while you're doing that, he'll just ask you questions, the cognitive part. And he'll say like, what's 7 minus 3? And I can't answer 4. Or if I answer 4, I fall over because I can't hold my balance while I'm thinking about something.
Right.
It's too many components. And so the point is to try to marry all those components back together with your balance, because that's the center that gets hit during your concussion. Your speech center and your eyes and your balance center all get rocked, and then they don't work together. And so it's so ridiculous.
So what's been the biggest challenge of that? Household tasks.
Oh my gosh, that's a great question.
Therapy. You can't drive yet.
I'm not allowed to drive because if you think about it, you have to. First of all, you have to use your peripheral vision, which I don't have. My eyes don't pair yet. They don't work together on peripheral vision. And then you have to take in a lot of information of which cars are around you and from what direction they're coming. And then you have to make decisions. Should I stop? Should I go? When do I change lanes? Do I need my blinker? And then, meanwhile, you're turning quickly left and right. And that motion, I have this thing where when I swing my head or if I walk, when I stop, the world continues to swing or continues to move once I stop. My brain doesn't know I've stopped. And so it's kind of like being on an escalator or a people mover, like the world keeps moving. And there's this fancy medical term for it, but it's kind of like, oh, you know what it's like? It's like, have you ever played the bat race during like relay races where you put your forehead on a bat and you walk around in circles and they tell you to walk the straight line? That thing, like he'll have me just bend down and pick something up off the floor very quickly and then have me walk. And I walk like that person. I walk like I've been on a bat spin for 10 times. I walk running into things, or I fall. And so that's very frustrating at PT. A lot of, there's so many things that are frustrating. For me, probably the thing that's most frustrating is like decision making. I can't plan and execute. I can execute. Like if you guys decide what you want for dinner and you set out the ingredients for me, or you shop and say this is what we want, if I see everything out, I can fix it. But if you ask me like, Mom, what's for dinner? I've lost that function to like think of something, then make a list, then figure out what I need, then go to the store and there's too many steps involved. And so at the very simplest form, like now I can cook, which I couldn't in the beginning, and now I can follow a recipe, which I really couldn't in the beginning. And now I can start making little decisions, like figuring out like maybe what we're going to have and maybe what I'm missing. So it's coming back, but I think the most frustrating thing are those really small decisions I can't seem to figure out. My brain doesn't know how to find those things. So that's been the hardest part, I think, for me.
Yeah. How has it been not teaching? Do you miss it?
I do miss it. I miss the kids. I miss the farm a lot, surprisingly. I didn't realize that was such a big part of my life. I love my coworkers. They're just beautiful, godly people. So I really miss the staff. They're an very important part of my life. I didn't realize how much. And I just feel really grateful the Lord really used that time to really solidify how much I love Desert, how much I love that community. So I've missed teaching. I also feel like there's certain, now that like I'm so stupid now, I look back and I go, gosh, I think I was really hard on myself. I think I did some things very well, and as a teacher, you're always like, oh, that wasn't a good lesson. I should have done it this way. I should have done it that way. And now I look back and I go, wow, no, I did some fun things. Those were fun. That was fun. Like we had a good time. There was learning going on and it was fun. And so I really do miss that.
Yeah.
I don't miss grading at all. Grading is a nightmare. And I don't miss RenWeb. I hate RenWeb. But I really miss my people. I miss hanging out with the kids. That was really fun. I miss knitting and doing sign language and just kind of hanging out.
Yeah, so what do you think God will call you to do in the future if you could predict it? Do you think you'll be able to return to teaching at some point, or what does that look like?
Wow, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. First of all, this has been like the weirdest year ever historically, and I think it's been weird for the school because we had a headmaster change, and there was some shifting going on there, and then worldwide it's a weird year because now we have this virus, and it just teaches us that we really don't know what tomorrow brings. Only God does. And so, for personally, professionally, it's like we stressed about things at the beginning of the year, maybe at the beginning of summer, as I looked at, and like the teachers would understand this, but as we looked at our ACSI certification coming up, which is a big deal for the school, and like how we want to serve on committees, and like how we want to be better at teaching, and what we wanted to do over the summer, and having this accident happen and kind of stripping that summer away from me, it immediately started changing what I was worrying about to something different. And I feel like the whole year's been that way for me. It's been a stripping away of worrying about the next thing that is out of my hands, whether it's like our family health concerns, or now the coronavirus, or how the school is doing, or it just, God knows. And so I have no idea what his plan is for me. I have no idea. I think I'd like to return to teaching. I don't think it's something you really ever leave. I just hate grading. Can I teach and not grade people? Can we just have fun and learn? I don't know.
So my last couple questions are kind of combined.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to, so if you could make others aware of this newest part of your story and what it's been like healing from a concussion, what would you say, or what advice would you give people, or awareness of this is a real thing and what it's like healing from it?
That's a great question. I just don't, it's, I don't know how to answer that. My mom died when I was 19, and then my dad died shortly after, like when I was 23. So in 4 years, I lost both my grandparents and my mom and my dad and my uncle. And so it's like my whole family got decimated. And you could say like, well, what would you say to someone, so that they could understand you? And I'm like, honestly, nothing. You can't explain what that's like. It's just something that you have to experience, and you hope no one ever experiences it, because it's something that it's just so profoundly life-changing. And so I just hope no one ever has a concussion, because it's, and you know what, the every brain doctor, every speech person, every ear doctor, every physical therapist I've gone to, they all say each concussion is completely different than any other concussion you or anyone else has had. And so your symptoms can be totally different than anyone else's, and it can be like the mildest looking concussion or the most violent concussion, and you have completely different outcomes and completely different centers of your brain that are affected. And it's crazy to me that I feel like your concussions, that one, it was bad, but it wasn't horrible. But it's the fact that you had two back to back that was so profoundly life-changing. For me, it was just such a tremendous blow. For others, it might be because it's the third tiny one they've had, or maybe the fifth one they bumped heads and they didn't know. So I would just say, I hope you never have one, and I hope that you can have compassion and patience for the person undergoing it. It's the most frustrating. I also see how like football players who have like chronic TBI, traumatic brain injuries, I also see how they have a high suicide rate, because I've had my concussion for a little while and it's made me a little depressed, I can't imagine living with that condition and having it actually worsening and having to still play football maybe over a decade or two. And I can see where people, get depressed and suicide because it's such a frustrating, debilitating injury. So I certainly have more compassion for people that suffer TBI through stroke or injury or sports. Mm-hmm. I guess I would just say to people, it's a bigger deal than you think it is. And to just be super, super patient because, and you know what? I mean, I'm a teacher too, and I'm certain there are some kids that, take advantage maybe of it, but my experience has been with my students as well, is I always think it's not as bad as it first appears, but then as a teacher, very quickly I understood before my accident, that what a student could do before, they couldn't do after, and it's unexplainable, it's inexplicable. You just go, this kid could do that before they got hit, and they can't now. And so something about that before I even had mine was very real to me, just witnessing that with students. Mm-hmm. And now that I've unfortunately experienced it, it's been like, oh my goodness. I'm so proud of my students for not bursting in tears much more often than they did, or I'm grateful for parents for being kind to me if I wasn't being, if I wasn't adjusting enough, because I don't know. I think it would be really hard to be, I think about Mrs. Flores a lot, and I think about how difficult it would be for me to be working. Like I couldn't be working while I'm trying to heal. Mm-hmm. And she still was. She was still working. And
she is.
Yeah, that's incredible to me. And still trying to make improvements and still rest her brain. And I think, oh my gosh, poor thing. Because she has, I'm sure, similar and different frustrations than I myself do. And she's still working, and I've been able to just rest and try to heal. And so, yeah, I would just say, wow, I hope you never have one. That's what I would say. Just be nice to people that do, because it's really life-changing. Mm-hmm. So,
well, thanks for sharing part of your testimony and what it was like to be so hands-on and then go to being so.
Yeah, it's funny because now everyone's like, oh my gosh, I'm in day 12 of quarantine. I'm like, dude, I've been in quarantine since June 26th. I haven't driven. I haven't left the house except to go to the doctor's office. Everything's too loud and bright and noisy, and try to go to your games, and oh my gosh. So yeah, it's like, welcome to quarantine. I've knit a lot of sweaters, a lot of baby sweaters. I think I'm on baby sweater 8.
Wow.
So thanks for talking.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.